All right, so I was updating paste to plan today.
Yes.
And we've been having problems with paste to plan with them adding things to the schema definition and not updating it. And so we've been manually updating all these things. And so I finally had enough time to sit down and say, okay, let's take a look at the updates. And because we've been having some people with SP1, 2016 SP1, and having problems processing some plans. And sure enough, that the updates for the schema for 2016 SP1 is pretty darn good. It's all the updates that we've put in there are in the schema, and I'm shocked that they've actually did a really good job and updated on the website and everything. I'm floored. I'm like, wow.
Well, that was Brent's Connect item about updating the schema that Joe Sack responded to personally.
Joe Sack.
Yeah,
I love that guy.
Sack. He's the best. Joe Sack is the best. Not just at being Joe Sack either, just like at most things.
Just most things. So yeah, that was, I was pleasantly surprised. So I'm about to run all of our, we have unit tests up against that XSD. So we're going to,
oh, cool.
Yeah, we're going to run as soon as I've just verified everything and then I jumped onto here. I'm going to run all that and then hopefully later today we'll have everything updated.
So we'll be able to take actual. So for the record, what Richie is talking about is if you paste an actual execution plan from 2016 and beyond in there, some validations fail.
SP1.
SP1. Some validations fail because they added a whole mess of new stuff to the XML, but they updated the schema, the XML schema that they keep online on the internets. And we're gonna fully support actual execution plans from 2016 SP1. You can paste in estimated plans. So if you get an estimated plan or something, or a plan from cache, you can put that in because it doesn't have all the extra stuff in it. It's only the actual plans that have all the additional junk in the trunk, as they say.
Yeah, and we have unit tests dating all the way back to 2005. So different versions of 2005, 2008, 2012, 2007, 2009, 2012, 11. Anyway, we have all these different versions that we have plans for, and we run our unit tests up against that. And so we're just going to add the SP1s to that and run them. And if everything works out, then we'll just publish it. If not, we'll just add the nodes that the validations that need to be there in the XSD and move on.
Mm-hmm. And that updated document will really help for Blitz cache as well, because I'll be able to add some new stuff in there based on that. Well, I mean, if any of it's in the cache plans, it seems like they add a lot of cool stuff to the actual plans that I don't get to play with in Blitz cache. It's a darn shame. It's not even in query store stuff either, so it's not like I'm just missing the boat on that.
It's a crying shame. And I'm here to tell you, Eric, that it's 12:16 and it's time.
It is, but we barely have any actual questions. So I was just going to keep talking to keep things fun.
Let's get busy.
All right. Okay, let's see here. James F, you have a question about encryption. I'm not the best on that stuff, admittedly. I am not much on security and certificates and whatnot. I would post that up on dba.stackexchange.com. James F asks another question though, a follow-up. Well, not a follow-up, a completely different question. There is an article on your site that talks about tempdb on localhost SSD with a SAN. How does that work with host failover? Oh, well, geez. That's not really for VMs. That's not a good VM idea. That is a good failover cluster idea. So if you're on a failover cluster, you can use local SSDs, and when tempdb fails over and is restarted, it'll just find the new thing and be happy. With VM hosts, it's completely weird and different, and I wouldn't do it. Anything interesting on that, Richie?
Nope.
Good, me either. That was it. Let's see here. Oh boy, I'm gonna scroll down through. Would you automate log file truncation and update growth for next extent and initial? No. No, leave it alone. If you have to ask, leave it alone. That is I don't like truncating log files.
Why is that?
Well, because they just have to grow again. When they grow, they don't get to instant file initialize. It's an instant file initialize. You can tell them on cold medicine initialize. So they have to grow, and it takes time because they have to zero out all that space. So when you back up a transaction log, the space inside it is truncated. It's the worst word that they could have possibly used for it, because everyone pictures their transaction log shrinking to a magical size when they say your log backup is your log file is truncated when you back it up. But that's not it. So internally, space can be reused after you back up a log file. I don't like truncating log files because, like I said, when they grow, it can be painful. Leave them alone. And as they're growing, database activity pauses while they grow because nothing else can get logged in there. Well, it's like, oh, hang on, we got to grow the file 10 gigs because you're rebuilding a dumb index. Have fun. All right. JH asks, any good methods of anticipating which index to tend to ahead of time before a weekly reindex job and accommodating their needed spacings? Geez, well, what indexes usually get rebuilt? I mean, if you're using Ola Hallengren, that all gets logged to the command log table. If you're using Minion, I assume they have some sort of logging apparatus on there. So I would just look at which ones get rebuilt and their size. Not sure where you want me to go with that. If you meant something else, please let me know. Joshua asks, have you used SP rename for tables much, and have you had issues using it? Just looking for experience points here. Well, yeah, actually, I have a fairly old blog post. I believe it's called the SP rename follies, and I got beat up in the comments about not using the GUI or something. Let me see if I can find it.
The what? What is that? A GUI?
Rename.
How do you spell that? GUI.
GUI. It's a French word, and it means what's on your screen, dummy.
Oh, wait. Goonies. That's one of my favorite movies back in the day, man. You should have said that in the first place. That's amazing.
Movie. So let me dump this into
good enough.
The chat window here for Joshua. So anyway, I had this thing with SP rename where I would mess up and I would either put I would put a DBO in when I didn't need to, and it would rename the table to dbo.dbo. Something else, and it was dumb. And then I couldn't rename it because something else had a lock on the table all of a sudden. I think it was probably like IntelliSense looking at this table like, did this dummy really do that? And so anyway, that was my funny SP rename folly. Was when I used it, I put in an extra DBO and I had a dbo.dbo.dbo.
Yeah, so I think the extent for my SP rename stuff for tables was back in the day. I mean, like mid 2000s, maybe even earlier.
Mid 2000s.
We were doing like poor man's replication. Just copying data over because we didn't want to deal with a lot of the replication and overhead. So it was a reporting system. We would just copy it over as a table name, and then we would do a rename, SP rename on the table that was in the database, and then we would rename the new table actually to whatever the original table name was and do it that way. So that's old school way of doing things.
Yeah, like that's almost like the weird ETL schema switch thing.
Yep.
Just flop a new table in.
Yep.
I always like tricks like that. I think they're neat, but then I always expect there to be some horrible drawback. Like I remember, I used to, I think I did Alter Schema Switch, or I did SP rename, and I remember waking up in the middle of the night once thinking, but what if statistics about the old table caches? I was just like, but wait, what if this horrible thing happens? And I woke up the next morning after finally drinking a bottle of whiskey and falling back asleep, and I was just like waiting for that email, whatever you did ruined the server, you're fired.
So is that an honest thing with DBAs? I mean, waking up in cold sweat at 3 o'clock in the morning, oh yeah. My gosh.
Yeah. Every time I would roll out a new job or a new thing to do, at my last job where it was a relativity shop, and I would roll out I would do this thing where I would script out I would like script out a blitz index to look for missing indexes, because with relativity you can add missing index requests, and they don't mind. They're like, cool, you're using our application in a different way. We respect that. So like they let you as a DBA add and tune indexes kind of to your heart's content. You can do all sorts of stuff in there. So I would set up these things that would run an SP blitz index and gather missing index requests from across all of the databases. At the time, blitz index didn't have to get all databases, and it had to be run individually and dumped to a table or something. So that was annoying, but I did it, and it worked. And then I would like review the missing index requests, and I would set up a script that would go through and add missing indexes. And I remember when I was doing that, it was just like I was petrified. And it was just like, like every time that ran, I would stay up and watch it and just like shake. Like, please don't mess. Please don't.
So
no red text.
You were Gloria Gaynor, so first you were afraid. You
Yeah,
were petrified.
I was. I still am. I still wait to get a phone call about one of those scripts. Like, hey man, remember that?
No, I don't. I don't at all. Click.
Nope, never heard of it. Neither has my NDA. Never. Goodbye.
See, that's the one thing I'm pretty happy about what's happened in the development space over the past 10 years or so, is that now we have become so test focused, and the test focus has absolutely been on repeating those tests and being able to write those tests and then run them at any given point. So now every code all the code that we write, at least here, we have unit tests for, and it's something.
Let's temper that statement. All the code that Richie writes has unit tests and stuff. All the code that we write has an AWS lab that may or may not meet all our needs. And and you, the end user of our free scripts, are often a guinea pig for our.
Yes, that oddly enough, that's true. But we get your feedback and we integrate it into the product. So thank you very much.
We will fix things based on that.
Yep.
I do like getting bug reports and stuff, because then I have something to do when I'm bored, other than blog and annoy Richie with blog posts and the word blog.
Yeah, I don't get bored around here. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, I get bored.
I know you get bored, but I don't get bored. There's so much stuff to do. I'm like, why don't you just come and help me, Eric? And he's like, no, another blog post. No.
Well, my problem is I only know Java, so I can't help you.
You can't help anybody.
No,
if you only know Java.
No. I have my Dr. Java app, and I can write little Java things in there. That's it. End of it.
Java. I spent the last 25 years of my career avoiding Java. So there you go.
Oh, it's not that bad. And it's gotten better. I mean, 25 years ago, Java today is better than it was 25 years ago. Don't be silly, Richie.
Nope.
Everything gets better. If SQL Server can get better over 25 years.
Eat your Java beans, please.
I don't know what that means. It's probably funny to someone. All right, let's see here. A user recently complained that some of their queries are taking longer than normal and timing out. Looking at our monitoring tool, it looks like there's more concurrent query activity, but not much more can be done if there's more traffic, correct? Oh boy. Sounds like you have
is that correct? Is it correct?
I mean, on the face of things, no, because you can always tune things more. There's always a query or an index to be tuned. If it's a third-party app, then no, probably not. The only thing you can do is throw some hardware at it, right? There's more RAM, more CPUs, there's something in there that can be done. I mean, when you say not much, I assume that, like, you've kind of thrown your hands up. If it's a third-party app, there's hardware. If it's your own internal app, then there's query and index tuning and more hardware. So I wouldn't say not much. I'd say there's not much you can do today, but there is stuff that you can start testing and doing over time.
I would say most things that I've run across with queries, the problem is with the query themselves.
Yeah.
So there's something in the structure of the query that can be adjusted a little bit, whether maybe it's temp tables or CTEs, or there's something there, maybe a join or two that can be tweaked so that it can make the query run faster. And it probably was done by a developer who just doesn't have much experience with SQL, and they just kind of went to Join City and just joined everything together.
Yeah,
Targetability is something that you need to take a look at as well.
It's true. That's a big one. Making sure that all your predicates can be searched on. There's a lot of stuff that I would keep looking at for that, but there's a lot. That's more than I could fit into a webcast, I think. Let's see here. Let me read this question first. I have a database. We'll call it production DB. It has small constant inserts, but it's a pseudo reporting database. Can I expect, assuming I implement them smartly, large gains in performance by implementing column store indexes? Geez, if you're inserting, I mean, are they lots of single row inserts, or are they like lots of large inserts that you can tinker with? Because there is like a weird row number that you have to hit for inserts for column store to like take them and make the delta stores and all that other compression thing, fancy language work correctly. If there's lots of small inserts, I would be hesitant to implement column store on it, because as far as I know, column store still doesn't handle writes terribly well, but I haven't messed with it all that much.
Sounds like a perfect candidate to test it in a development.
Does sound pretty good. I mean, you know, from what I have messed with, column store is pretty rocking technology. The compression is awesome. You know, you make your data teeny tiny. Lots of aggregation queries are pretty sweet, and you know, if your queries are fairly selective, you can get lots of good you know, row and segment elimination, I believe it's called. It's a fancy word for it. So that, you know, there is lots of great stuff about column store. Whether it's going to work in your specific use case with the inserts, I am not sure.
Try it. Let us know. We'd love to find out.
Let's see here. John, someone named John Smith, getting the squad car, asked another question. I've assigned 28 gigs of memory to a SQL server. Task Manager, of course, says it's using 28 gigs. Task Manager is not reliable for that. How do I tell how SQL Server is using those 28 gigs? Like X% are going to this thing and Y are going to that thing. There are all sorts of cool system DMVs where you can see what's in memory. I think there's like buffer memory, system.dm buffer memory descriptors or something like that. You can figure out what tables and what indexes are in memory. You can query the plan cache and figure out how many gigs or megs of plans you have in memory. So there is all sorts of interesting stuff you can look at. I would just check out the DMVs for that. I would just read up on the memory DMVs and figure out which ones are in there. There might be a query somewhere on a blog. I just don't know. Brent would know if there was on there offhand. Not that good. Let's see here. In general, how do you start debugging parameter sniffing issues? Well, the first thing I do is I make a temporary stored procedure. I don't test with local variables. And then I figure out what runtime parameters are and what compile parameters are. And then I figure out what a plan would look like with each of them. And if that's the same, then I start looking for outliers. So I might go into my data and I might start looking for certain values that have a big skew to them. By that I mean, if there's one type of value that has millions and millions or just way more rows than other values in general, then I start comparing the plan that gets by itself to plans that smaller values get by itself. The classic example is if you have a sales report between Rhode Island and Texas, or if you have a sales report store procedure, you call Rhode Island, it's going to get one plan. If you call Texas, it's going to get a different plan, or it should get a different plan. It may need a different plan because the Rhode Island plan would not be sufficient for it. If you call Texas first, you'll get the big Texas plan, and then Rhode Island will reuse that, and that might be good or bad because you might be spinning up a lot of additional resources to help out Rhode Island. So there are a lot of ways to go with that, but in general, I start looking at common variables to get passed in. And if you know, isolated, they get different plans and what those plans are. It could be an indexing thing where, like, you know, SQL is choosing like a weird key lookup plan for a smaller variable because that makes sense. And then when a large variable comes in, it starts doing billions and billions of key lookups, and that doesn't make sense for the larger variable. So that could be an index thing where if you know, can tinker with an index, you'll take away the key lookup plan as a choice for the large and small variables.
It sounds like that you need to do a little bit of data profiling.
A little bit.
When you're trying to find these parameter sniffing. So if you're unfamiliar with data profiling, there's some pretty decent tools out there for it. I wrote a small script that I haven't touched in a couple of years that kind of gets you 75% of the way there, 70% there, called SP Data Profile. But you want to take a look at your data, take a look at your SKU, and then do all the stuff that Erik just said. Whatever he said.
In order. No one was paying attention there anyway. I feel bad. Our transcriptionist is going to fall asleep. Late stage Groucho Marx is falling asleep. Nathan asks, what causes a query plan to change? If all of the variables going in are the same, just the values are different, could autostats trigger new plans that seem to not be as good? Well, that sounds a lot like parameter sniffing too. Could be. So if you're talking about if you have a store procedure that takes the same 3 variables and you pass in the same 3 variables, but then execution plans are different. Well, yeah, it sounds like autostats could have updated and invalidated an execution plan, and then a weird set of variables may have gotten passed in, and you may have gotten one plan, and that plan doesn't make sense for anything else. That could be one thing. If that plan uses temp tables, if there's a recompile threshold with temp tables and stored procedures. Paul White wrote the bangingest blog post about it like a decade ago. It's called Temp Tables and Stored Procedures. If you want to check that out, your stored procedure uses temp tables. After a temp table changes enough times that something recompiles and you get a different plan and statistics get updated. So all sorts of stuff happens. So there's a lot to look at with that. But
what about an index rebuild? Will that trigger as well?
Yes, because an index rebuild does update statistics. A lot of other stuff too. If you change there are a lot of table definition changes, stuff like that. If the plan gets thrown out of cache for some reason, like memory pressure, next time you go and run that sort of procedure, you'll have to come up with a new plan, and that new plan may have been based on some weird set of variables. I would look into. Because you can't really look into that. It either happened or it didn't. Let's see here. Richard asks, what's the best way to identify unused indexes? What length of time should they be unused before they consider them for delete? Well, Richard, you know where you are, right? You know that you're in the Brent Ozar Unlimited office hours, and that we publish a set of scripts called the First Responder Kit. And one of those scripts is called SP Blitz Index. And SP Blitz Index tells you when you have unused indexes. That's a really great place to start for free.
For free. And to be honest, those are the scripts that I used first before I came here. So
same.
They're awesome.
I was like dismally familiar with them. Let's see here. But let's see, to follow up, what length of time should they be unused before considering them for delete? Well, that's why you don't delete them. You just disable them. So then if it comes up that you needed one of those indexes, it's a lot easier to go back into the GUI and right click and hit rebuild than it is to figure out which index definition you lost entirely. What length of time kind of depends on your application. You could have that index that gets used once a month for a end of month processing report, or quarterly for some vice president report that you might absolutely need, but that might look unused the rest of the time. So when I start looking at that stuff, I like to run Blitz Index weekly, and then look at things. And what I like to look for over longer periods of time than a week is writes versus reads. So for unused indexes, you're always going to see things that get flagged as unused indexes in SP Blitz Index are always 0 reads. What I like to look for are ones that also have high writes. Because if they have 0 reads and 0 writes, I just don't care. They can sit there and take up metadata space and not do anything. It doesn't really bother me much, especially because I don't rebuild indexes, so it doesn't matter. But if they have really high writes and no reads, then I start getting concerned, because that's slowing me down. That's hurting IO. That's hurting modifications, inserts, updates, and deletes. But it's not really helping any read queries. So more than length of time, I like to look at how many writes have accumulated on an index. It's a good way to go.
So here's another question. Next week, Erik should be named Sloth and Richie should be named Chunk, or the other way, or whatever you guys want. Fight over it. I called Data, but thank you. That's a good suggestion. Sloth over here is probably.
I want to take Mouth.
Mouth. Oh,
he was my favorite.
Yeah. That actually is pretty accurate.
That scene where he's talking to the maid in Spanish about where the drugs are. No, that still makes me laugh.
Here's another question. When will I see a groupby.org presentation from one of you two fine gentlemen?
Well, not the next one around, because those presentations already got picked. I was sort of intentionally not throwing my hat in the ring for the first couple, because I really wanted other people. I didn't want it to seem like the Brent Ozar Unlimited show, for group buy. But Brent is actually actively encouraging us to submit for future sessions. So probably the next one.
Yeah, I can't wait till all you guys hear about the intricacies of JavaScript promises compared to callbacks, because I'm sure all you wanted to hear about that.
Yeah, tell me more about sorting arrays efficiently.
Who does that anymore, man?
I don't know.
Let the CS 101 guys, let them figure that out.
I'm basically a CS 101 guy. So that's my gig. That's what I do. Let's see here. Is there a reason to shrink if you have a non-normal operation that made it grow in the first place? Well, I'm gonna yeah, go ahead and shrink it down. Just truncate the empty space. I assume you're talking about your data file or your log file. I'm gonna assume you're not talking about anything personal. So what I would do is just get rid of the empty space. There's a truncate only thing you can do where you just get rid of the empty space. And that's usually the safest thing to go. If you see, whenever people talk about the bad stuff that shrinking a file causes, it's when you it's like when you shrink a file like way beyond just what's empty. That when you start like mashing stuff, things get really bad. Lately, when I've tested it and I've looked at things and I've just like been getting like when I do like demo stuff and I blow up stuff by doing things, then I have all this empty space in my Stack Overflow data file that just isn't used by anything. I'll truncate the empty space in like gig or 5 gig increments. And nothing, and then like if I check index fragmentation after that, like, oh, this will make a good blog post, but I haven't seen anything for fragmentation like that in a while, so might be.
Meanwhile, I'm in derailing mode. So Eric, which make, model, headset, and microphone are you using? Pros and cons.
I don't know. Brent sent it to me. It is an Audio-Technica DPHS1. And it is hooked into what's it called? The Scarlett Focusrite?
Focusrite Scarlett 2i2. I think that's pretty standard what we've got here.
Yeah, it has the 1 jack, not the 2 jacks.
Oh, so you've got the Focusrite Scarlett Solo.
Yeah, well, it has the big jack and then the little microphone jack.
Yeah. And
the knob, and I can hear myself talk too much. And then it has a guitar thing on it. So I guess if I wanted to play the guitar, I could do that too.
Yeah, that's a Solo. I've got the audio interface that I'm using is the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2. Has 2 audio inputs. Never use them. Only need 1 because there's only 1 of me. I'm also using the Audio-Technica ATH50X headphones with memory foam inserts, as well as a special skin. And you can see it right there. Because I'm vain like that. And I'm also using an Audio-Technica 2005 microphone, which is a USB and XLR. One kind of flexibility of USB or XLR. I think I've kind of outgrown that, and I only need an XLR because I'm using the Scarlett so much. So, but if I'm ever on the road and I need a USB, it's kind of there. So that's kind of my gear and how we've got this set up.
And that was my chance to tune out. Thanks, Richie.
And everybody, except that one guy is like, what?
Good time. All right. Guillermo asks a fun learning question. I like this one because I don't have to get too specific, and then it's okay if I NyQuil this one a little bit. What's your favorite resource to learn about query processing internals? And what do you recommend for getting better at troubleshooting query performance issues? Well, for me, Paul White's blog posts. when you start reading them, they will be a million years beyond your reach. But as you mature, they will start to make more sense. Ditto Adam Mechanic's blog posts. They both write some rocket sciencey stuff. As far as other stuff goes, the SQL Server internals books by Kalen Delaney et al. Are good. There are optimizer chapters written by Connor Cunningham, who used to own the query optimizer at Microsoft. And the 2012 and 2008 R2 versions of that are pretty much the same. So I would just stick to the 2012 one. Those are my favorites. Those are my crazy people.
Yeah, I think I started my journey just kind of paying attention to what people were writing over Twitter and posting on Twitter. A lot of, oddly enough, Brent Ozar stuff. I don't know why I listen to that guy, but then I started attending a lot of SQL Saturdays and started presenting to a bunch of SQL Saturdays about project management. That's kind of how I got started. I was talking about project management at SQL Saturdays, just so I could go in and I could kind of listen, meet the speakers kind of the night before, and then meet and hear all the database stuff kind of afterwards. And the Summit is a great place, I think, to learn a whole bunch of different stuff and meet a whole bunch of different people. So that's kind of how I came into the whole database stuff. And now I don't even touch it at all. Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
Back to my developer roots.
Yay. Yeah, so I mean, like, like the gateway to query processing knowledge really is learning about execution plans. So the more you can learn about execution plans, the more you can pry into.
Oh, and Grant has a good book on that too, I believe.
He does.
Yeah, I've read that one. That was a good one.
Yeah, Grant has a good book on it. Grant Fritchie, Fritchey, Fritchie, has a book on execution plans. And a long time ago, a guy named Fabiano Amorim, Amorim, published a series for Simple Talk where he talked through common execution plan operators. And I used to love reading that over and over again.
I remember that. That was pretty good.
It was like 14 or 15 different things about all different query plan operators. And what really impressed me so much about those was that this guy could write queries that would produce certain operators. And that's when it started to make sense to me, like, oh no, like there's a logic to this. Like when I do certain things, certain operators are going to pop up, and this is why. And that was one of the first like light bulb SQL moments I ever had, was reading through this, like, you can make it do that. That means it does that reliably based on things. And that was lovely for me.
So, but my first aha in SQL Server was I was at SQL Saturday Orlando, and I sat through an Adam Mechanic hour-long session, and I didn't get lost. Right, so this is like a 400 level session, and I'm sitting there, and I'm hanging in there, and I'm like, I got it. And then at the end, it was like, I understood that. It was like light bulbs start going off, fireworks, behind my head. I'm like, wow.
Do you remember which talk it was?
No, I have no idea. I remember. Oh, I'm sure I could go back and figure it out. But
one of my favorite talks ever by him was it's on YouTube. It was a Tech Ed conference talk, and it's called like the top 5 query execution plan problems that you can fix, or something like that. And it was just like watching. It was like wait, I'm with you on that. Like,
was that the crazy ones where he goes top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and it may have been the same one.
Yeah, and then like all of a sudden it's parallel and there's a distinct, and the averages are right. And you're like, oh, I get it. Like that made sense to me. I can go home and reproduce that. But Adam Mechanic and Paul White were those two, like the main.
So I know we're a little bit over time, but let's get one more. So what are you each learning now for your next blog posts?
Learning? Oh boy. I've been writing and rewriting a lot of training material for some upcoming videos that are going to be part of our cool subscription relaunch. So I've been going over training materials on sargability, dynamic SQL, filtered indexes, computed columns, common table expressions, tons of stuff like that. I don't know how much of it's going to make it to blog posts, because I do still have to record it all, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I've been doing a ton of serverless and JavaScript and that type of stuff. So that probably is not going to make it to our blog, at least brentozar.com. I don't really write too much because I'm so busy doing stuff. But I did start a blog post series on entity framework, kind of for the DBA, and kind of like, the top 5 or 6 things that you can do to kind of optimize and find problems in entity framework queries. So I'm hoping to finish that soon, but I started that last year, so we'll see how much I can get done. Because as opposed to Erik, I'm not bored here.
I'm not actually bored. Sometimes it's just weird to be able to choose what you want to do. Sometimes, like, you have a mission, you have a dedicated.
I am on a mission. This is a mission, not a small time thing.
Yeah, like when I have free time, otherwise I'm not on client time, and I get to pick what to do. I'm like, first responder kit, blog, new training material. Like, there's like all these directions that I get pulled in. It's fun.
Someday I'm going to write a video training, and it's just going to be how to live with Erik, and it's going to be like an hour or 2 hours of just that.
I can't wait for my wife to watch that.
Well, I'm mainly doing it for your kid, so.
Oh, she doesn't know. She barely knows I'm here.
She will. she will figure out that you're in a closet. Okay.
She will. Well, it's not that closety. It's pretty. This is like a separate zip code in New York.
It's closety.
All right, you're closety. All right,
Yeah.
we should go. We should
go.
Goodbye. Thank you for showing up. Wish me well, because I'm sick. Goodbye.